Hi, I'm Stephen Carson coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri in these United States. Thanks for the support. 2 new subscribers got on Subscribestar and added while I was on hiatus, while I was on my summer vacation. So really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. You can support me by going to the YouTube video description and get a link to my Subscribestar. Most people donate a measly $5 a month, but it adds up. Lets me pay graphic designer and stuff. Okay, so we are going to do something fairly quick today. This is a topic that really caught my interest when it was mentioned in a Twitter space that I was listening to, and I'm not going to claim that I'm doing comprehensive treatment of this, but I hope to get you interested in the topic. I didn't know about it. I thought it was really interesting. In fact, I guess here's the way I'll introduce the topic. A common thing on Twitter, at least, is to say, why should I care about what Israel is doing in Gaza? It's, one tribe attacking another tribe over on the other side of the world. What does that have to do with me? My most common response is to bring up September 11th and to say that, it's not exactly a secret that Israel is doing this genocide in Gaza with the full support of the U.S. government, with U.S. weapons, U.S. money, U.S. Political backing. Many countries are condemning what Israel's doing, but U.S. Vetoes the UN resolutions and so on and so forth, right? So that's one response, is that someone might notice that the U.S. is backing this and be pretty upset about it, and we might get some blowback, like happened with September 11th. So there's a reason to care as an American about it. But here's another reason, which I hadn't really been aware of. And that is that Gaza and the West Bank have become places where Israeli spying technology, surveillance technology, pacification techniques and technology, weaponry, they try it out there and then they use it as like a marketing thing to say, hey, look, we've been using this technology over here. Would you like to use it on your own citizens? You think I'm joking, but actually, this is pretty much what they say, as we'll see. So I've got more material that I want to try to go through, but I'm going to kind of skip around. Actually, let's start with one that I think we can just go through in its entirety. So this is an article by Jonathan Cook. It's a little bit old. It's from 2019. Here, wait a second. Switch the article itself. Not that. There we go. Okay. Yeah, posted December 2019, but the story hasn't changed much. In fact, if anything, it's gotten to be an increasing issue in the subsequent years. So this is from Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, Jonathan Cook, a name I often see mentioned in as a decent journalist. Israeli spyware technology tested on Palestinians, now operating in a city near you. And I think he's going to explain this very clearly. Okay, so I think I'm just going to do a read through of this because all of this is pretty relevant. And then I've got a book, which I'm going to skip around in a bit, but try to expand on a few of these items. There's a lot to say here, the different companies, and anyway. But I'm going to try not to get bogged down in details and just give you a teaser here of a topic that I think is pretty significant. Okay, so this is by Jonathan Cook. Digital age weapons developed by Israel to oppress Palestinians are rapidly being repurposed for much wider application for use against Western publics. Israel's status as startup nation was established more than 2 decades ago, but its reputation for high-tech innovation always depended on a dark side, as the Israeli analyst Jeff Halper warned in his book, War Against the People. Israel, he argued, had achieved a pivotal role globally in merging new digital technologies with the homeland security industry. The danger, he said, was that gradually we would all become Palestinians. Critics like Halper have warned that Israel is treating the millions of Palestinians under its military rule effectively as guinea pigs in open-air laboratories. They have become the test bed for developing not only new conventional weapon systems, but also new tools for mass surveillance and control. As a recent report in the Israeli Haaretz newspaper observed, Israel's surveillance operations against Palestinians is among the largest of its kind in the world. It includes monitoring the media, social media, and the population as a whole. Tiny though it may be in size, Israel has long been a world leader in an extremely lucrative arms trade, selling to authoritarian regimes around the world its weapons systems as battlefield tested on Palestinians. But this trade in military hardware is increasingly being overshadowed by a market for belligerent software, tools for waging cyber warfare. Israel can rightly claim to be a world authority on surveilling, controlling, and oppressing populations under its rule. This is in what in business we call a unique selling proposition. Israel's got a unique selling proposition because of how it has been treating the Palestinians. Israeli army intelligence units like 8200 teach soldiers how to spy on Palestinians through their phones, computers, and social media accounts. Many later go on to set up companies developing similar software for more general application. And in looking into this Unit 8200 just keeps coming up. They work for the government, learning this tech, and then they do a startup, which just basically sells the technology to people around the world, governments around the world, mostly. Not only, but mostly. While Israel has been keen to keep its fingerprints off much of this new Big Brother technology by outsourcing additional development to graduates of these units, critics note that it has implicitly sanctioned such activities by providing these firms with export licenses. Apps using sophisticated surveillance technology originating in Israel are increasingly common in our digital lives. Some have been put to relatively benign use. Waze, W-A-Z-E, which I've used, tracks traffic congestion and allows drivers to reach destinations faster, while Get, G-E-T-T, pairs customers up with nearby taxis through their phones. But some of the more covert technology produced by Israeli developers sticks much closer to its original military purpose. As recent cases highlight, this offensive software has been sold both to nations wishing to spy on their own citizens or rival states, and to private corporations hoping to gain an edge on competitors or better commercially exploit and manipulate their customers. Once incorporated into social media platforms with billions of users, such spyware offers state security agencies a potential near global reach. The potential for intrusion explains the sometimes fraught relationship between Israeli tech firms and Silicon Valley, as the latter, the Silicon Valley guys, struggle to take control of this malware. In a sign of the tensions, WhatsApp, a social media platform owned by Facebook, initiated the first lawsuit of its kind in a California court in October. This would be October 2019, given when the article was published. In October 2019, against NSO, Israel's largest surveillance company. Remember NSO, that's going to come up. WhatsApp accuses NSO of cyber attacks. In a 2-week period in early May, examined by WhatsApp, NSO is reported to have targeted the mobile phones of more than 1,400 users in 20 countries. Okay, spyware for repressive regimes. And it actually, the photo here is a photo of the Israeli NSO group in Herzliya near Tel Aviv, taken in 2016. And we'll find a little bit more about why an iPhone is featured in that photo in a moment. NSO was founded in 2010 by Omri Levy and Shalev Julio, both reported to be graduates of Unit 8200. NSO's spyware, known as Pegasus, has been used against human rights activists, lawyers, religious leaders, journalists, and aid workers. According to Reuters, senior officials of U.S. allies have also been targeted by NSO. After taking charge of the user's phone without their knowledge, Pegasus copies data and turns on the microphone for surveillance. Forbes magazine has described it as the world's most invasive mobile spy kit. NSO has licensed the software to dozens of governments, including regimes such as Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, Mexico, and Morocco, all of which possess long records of human rights abuses. Amnesty International has complained that its staff are among those targeted by NSO spyware. It is currently suing the Israeli government for issuing the company with an export license. Separately, NSO malware is suspected of having been used to target Omar Abdulaziz, a friend of the murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Abdulaziz's phone was hacked while he was in regular contact with Khashoggi shortly before the latter was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last year. That would be 2018. In late November, Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, the top Democrat on the U.S. Senate Finance Committee, said he had called on the Commerce Department to investigate the extent to which companies like NSO were hacking U.S. citizens. In 2014, whistleblowers revealed that Unit 8200 routinely spied on Palestinians, trawling through their phones and computers for evidence of sexual improprieties, health problems, or financial difficulties that could be used to pressure them into collaborating with Israel's military authorities. You're not nervous, right, folks? You have nothing to hide. Shouldn't be nervous if you have nothing to hide. That's what they always say. The soldiers wrote that Palestinians were completely exposed to espionage and surveillance by Israeli intelligence. It is used for political persecution and to create divisions within Palestinian society by recruiting collaborators and driving parts of Palestinian society against itself. Despite officials issuing export licenses to NSO, Israeli government minister Ziv Elkin denied Israeli government involvement in the hacking of WhatsApp. He told Israeli radio, "Everyone understands that this is not about the state of Israel." In the same week that WhatsApp launched its legal action, U.S. television network NBC revealed that Silicon Valley is nonetheless keen to reach out to Israeli startups deeply implicated in abuses associated with the occupation. For example, Microsoft has invested heavily in AnyVision to further develop sophisticated facial recognition technology that already helps the Israeli military oppress Palestinians. Israel's security services ties to AnyVision are barely hidden. Its advisory board includes Tamir Pardo, the former head of Israel's Mossad spy agency. The company's president, Amir Kane, previously served as head of Malmab, the Defense Ministry's security department. Its main software, Better Tomorrow, has been nicknamed Occupation Google because the firm claims it can identify and track any Palestinian by searching footage from the Israeli army's extensive network of surveillance cameras in the occupied territories. The technology allows AnyVision to track Palestinians as they move between different live feeds, including security cameras at checkpoints and smartphones. It works similarly in tracking vehicle registration plates. Last year, AnyVision won the Israel Defense Prize, though the company was not identified in the accompanying press material, apparently because of the controversial nature of its work. NBC accessed a picture of AnyVision's team receiving the award. Despite obvious ethical problems, Microsoft's investment suggests it aims to incorporate the software into its own programs. That prospect has caused grave concern among human rights groups. Shankar Narayan of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, warned of a future all too familiar to Palestinians living under Israeli rule. Face recognition is possibly the most perfect tool for complete government control in public spaces. The widespread use of face surveillance flips the premise of freedom on its head, and you start becoming a society where everyone is tracked, no matter what they do, all the time. AnyVision software has already been sold internationally to casinos, sports stadiums, airports, theme parks, and department stores. U.S. cities, including San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley, have banned the use of this kind of facial recognition technology by the police or other agencies, fearing it is too invasive and readily open to abuse. Nicole Ozer, the Technology and Civil Liberties Director of the ACLU, wrote a letter earlier this year warning of the danger that the next generation will have to fear being tracked by the government for attending a protest, going to their place of worship, or simply living their lives. According to Yael Berda, a researcher at Harvard University, Israel maintains a list of some 200,000 Palestinians in the West Bank it once surveilled around the clock, 1 in 5 of the male population in the West Bank. Technologies like AnyVisions are seen as vital to keeping this vast group under constant monitoring. A former AnyVision employee told NBC that the Palestinians were treated as a testing ground. The technology was field tested in one of the world's most demanding security environments, and we were now rolling it out to the rest of the market, he said. The Israeli government itself has had a growing interest in using these spying technologies in the US and Europe, as its occupation has become the focus of controversy and scrutiny in mainstream political discourse. In the UK, the shift in the political climate has been highlighted by the election of Jeremy Corbyn, is old news, right? A longtime Palestinian rights activist to head the opposition Labour Party. I'm going to skip. Okay. More generally, Israel fears the flourishing international solidarity movement, BDS, boycott, divest, sanctions, something like that, which calls for a boycott of Israel, modeled on the one against apartheid South Africa, until it stops oppressing Palestinians. The BDS movement has grown strongly on many U.S. campuses. As a result, Israeli cyber firms have been drawn ever more deeply into efforts to manipulate public discourse about Israel, apparently including by meddling in foreign elections. Hey, welcome to today's Twitter, right? If you haven't noticed. In fact, one Israeli company, Psy Group, PSY, Psy Group, was shut down last year after the FBI began investigating allegations that it had tried to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election through Facebook. The New Yorker reported that the group had marketed itself as a private Mossad for hire. We should all have a private Mossad for hire, right? Psy Group boasted among its advisors Ram bin Barak, a former deputy director general of Mossad, and Yaakov Amidror, a former head of Israel's National Security Council, which advises the prime minister. Psy Group was founded by a former military intelligence officer, Roy Burstein. There are fears that Psy Group and other firms are effectively front groups, allowing Israeli intelligence to spy and meddle in the U.S. without openly flouting U.S. laws. Psy Group's activities also extend to what Ben Barak has described as a war on student activists. The firm gathered data, most of it online, to intimidate and threaten students on several campuses known for Palestinian solidarity activities. In case you missed it, as I said at the beginning, this article is from December 2019. So this is before October 7th, 2023, subsequent protests on campuses against what Israel was doing in Gaza, and then crackdowns on those students at campuses, right? As well as movements against universities that were viewed as not cracking down hard enough, like Columbia, I believe. According to the New Yorker, its Project Butterfly, launched in early 2016, aimed to destabilize and disrupt anti-Israel movements from within. It used fake IP addresses to gather information on BDS activists, and then waged psyops using false online identities and websites to damage the activists' reputations. But the Psy Group appears to be the tip of an iceberg. The Black Cube intelligence operation was exposed last year to have been carrying out hostile surveillance of leading members of the Barack Obama administration. The aim of the spying operations appear to have included undermining the nuclear accord Obama signed in 2015 with Iran, which was vehemently opposed by the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Obama's successor, Donald Trump, unilaterally scrapped the deal last year, 2018. Black Cube also worked on behalf of disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, collecting information on women who had accused him of sexual assault or rape. One of Black Cube's founders, Dan Zarella, is a veteran of the Israeli military's Secret Special Operations Unit. Staff are typically recruited from Mossad, the army, or the Shin Bet, Israel's domestic intelligence agency that spies on Palestinians. The late Meir Dagan, a former Mossad head, was at one point the company's president. Structured like Israel's intelligence agencies, Black Cube is known to have worked closely in the past with the Israeli Defense Ministry and was located for a time on a military base. The various scandals it has been involved in, far from harming the company, have generated publicity, helping it to expand rapidly as customers line up for its specialist services. No press is bad press, I guess, right? A raft of similar Israeli firms seeking to blur the distinction between private and public spaces has also started to make headlines, invariably for the wrong reasons. Onavo, an Israeli data collection company established by two veterans of Unit 8200, was acquired by Facebook in 2013. Apple banned its VPN app last year over revelations that it was providing unlimited access to users' data. So let me mention that again. So let's see, that would have been in 2018. Apple banned this Israeli data collection company's VPN app because it was not just being a VPN app, it was spyware, right? Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Gilad Erdan, who heads a secretive campaign to demonize overseas BDS activists, had regular meetings last year with another firm, Concert, according to a Haaretz report. This covert group, which is exempt from Israel's Freedom of Information laws, has received $36 million in funding from the Israeli government. Its directors and shareholders are a who's who of Israel's security and intelligence elite. Another leading Israeli firm, Kandiru, is named for a small Amazonian fish that is reputed to secretly invade the human body where it becomes a parasite. Lovely. Kandiru sells its hacking tools mostly to Western governments, although its operations are shrouded in secrecy, according to Haaretz. Its staff is drawn almost exclusively from Unit 8200. Once again, as an example of the linkages between public uses and covert application of technologies developed by Israeli firms, Kandiru's chief executive, Eitan Aklau, previously headed Get, the taxi service app. Israel's security elite is cashing in on this new market for cyber warfare, exploiting, as it did with the trade in conventional arms, a ready-made and captive Palestinian population on which it can test its technology. At the same time, Israel is gradually normalizing in the West invasive and oppressive technologies long familiar to Palestinians. So if you ever hear the phrase, we're all Palestinians now, that's what it's talking about. Taking what's been done to the Palestinians, bringing it everywhere. Facial recognition software allows for ever more sophisticated racial and political profiling. Covert data gathering and surveillance smashes the traditional boundaries between private and public spaces. The resulting malicious internet searching for private information or doxing campaigns makes it easy to intimidate, threaten, and undermine those who dissent, or, like the human rights community, try to hold the powerful to account. If this dystopian future continues to unfold, New York, London, Berlin, and Paris may end up under cyber siege, just like Nablus, Hebron, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, and Western publics may come to understand what it means to live inside a surveillance state engaged in cyber warfare against those it seeks to control. All right. Yeah, Benjamin Rood says the degree of cynicism is insane. Yeah, that's one way to put it. We could just call it evil. Okay, yeah, and Nudge Unit, very good point, sir. Imagine what's possible now or in the near future with this stuff empowered with AI. That is a thought worth thinking about. Let's switch now. See if I can do this slickly, more or less slickly, to this book, The Palestine Laboratory by Antony Lowenstein, How Israel Exports the Technology of Occupation Around the World. Obviously, this book pretty much covers similar ground, but sorry, I'm distracted by the fact that I didn't get my screen layout right. How can I fix that? Give me just a sec. I think I can fix it. So I do that, pull that down. How's that look now? That's better. Okay. Oh, except now it's, sorry, too much. Give me a sec. Missed something when I was setting things up. I will do it live, unfortunately. There we go. Okay, that's pretty. All right. So this is a whole book. It's not that long, but I did sort of read, scan it, and caught a few things. Not going to go through the whole thing, but going to skip around, catch some things. Yeah, Benjamin Rood says we are all subject to this evil. Quite agree. Okay, so let's cover as much as I can in the short time I have today. Okay, so preface, the Gaza laboratory. So this theme again, right, that Gaza becomes, Gaza, the West Bank, and so forth, becomes a laboratory where they can try out various technologies that are then packaged and sold by these private companies that are very, very closely aligned with like Israeli intelligence and military and stuff. These private companies and sell them to our governments to be used on us. Nice. Let's see. Yeah, now this book is more recent. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. This is 2023. And the preface is 2024. So this book is aware of October 7th. What went so wrong on October 7th for Israel was a combination of high-tech arrogance, a belief that Israel's surveillance apparatus was impenetrable, and the intelligence agency's fatal blindness to clear signs that Hamas was preparing a major attack. Let's see. Yeah, we now know, I'll read a little more of this than I'd marked. This is interesting, I think. We now know that Israeli intelligence was informed of Hamas's plans at least 1 year before the attacks, and yet did not believe that the militant group was capable or interested in a major escalation. But none of this has stopped Israel live testing new weapons during its Scorched Earth campaign in Gaza after October 7th, what they are continuing to do ever since, right? We're going on, heading towards 2 years of this slaughter in Gaza. These tools of war were proudly displayed on social media for both a domestic and international audience, as well as potential global buyers. So it's all, we're viewing horror, they're doing an ad. It's advertisement for their stuff. Hey, look what we're doing, and you can buy it for a low price. Israel used artificial intelligence-enabled weapons, striking non-military targets with unprecedented ferocity. It's a mass assassination factory, one Israeli intelligence officer said. This is how the Palestine laboratory works. It's for this reason that I expect the Israeli weapons industry to thrive after October 7th. Israel's leading defense company, Elbit, E-L-B-I-T, Elbit, already wrote that it was experiencing a considerable increased demand. Global arms fairs in Singapore and Paris saw a large Israeli presence promoting weapons, killer drones, and surveillance tech that had been battle-tested in Gaza. It's guaranteed that the tools of death so ruthlessly used in Gaza will soon appear in other conflict zones. Okay, that's what struck me about the preface, and getting lots of good comments. Yeah, you really will, Nudge Unit says, you really will have your own FBI agent tracking and interacting with you, except it will be an LLM. Benjamin Rood brings up Palantir. Yes. Palantir is not brought up in this book, I don't think, but yeah, relevant. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's see. Okay, then moving on to the introduction. Let's see. Sorry, I am going to be skipping around quite a bit, so excuse me while I kind of find my highlights that I actually want to cover. Yeah, Israel has developed a world-class weapons industry with equipment conveniently tested on occupied Palestinians, then marketed as battle-tested. Cashing in on the IDF brand has successfully led to Israeli security companies being some of the most successful in the world. The Palestine laboratory is a signature Israeli selling point. And this is interesting. I'm not going to focus in on this where he focuses in on this book, so let me just share it now. In the early 80s, they disastrously invaded and occupied Lebanon and eventually were driven out. The Israelis then used the term surgical precision when describing the deadly attacks by its Air Force. I remember that phrase coming up in the Iraq War, almost 20 years later in 2003. That was a lie because countless innocent Lebanese were murdered. Nonetheless, as I show in this book, despite floundering militarily in Lebanon, Israel used the war as a selling point for its weaponry and tactics. This is a really interesting point, and I might highlight it later, and this is true for the U.S. defense industry as well. Just that there is a war seems to become a marketing point. They're able to develop and market weapons out of these wars, even if the war doesn't go well for the country that's selling this weaponry or this surveillance technology or whatever. That's quite interesting, isn't it? There's an old saying, war is the health of the state, right? We usually would think a winning war is the health of the state. Maybe as long as the war doesn't wipe you out, it's just a tactical loss. Even a loss war, a losing war is not so bad. Yep. Yeah, so Israeli arms sales in 2021 were the highest on record, surging 55% over the previous 2 years to $11 billion. Europe was the biggest recipient of these weapons. Rockets, aerial defense systems, missiles, cyber weapons, and radar were just some of the equipment sold by the Jewish state. The result is that Israel is now one of the top 10 weapons dealers in the world. Pretty good for a tiny little country. The little country that could. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so it's not just Israel exporting its occupation expertise. Some Americans are keen to learn on the ground in the Jewish state itself before taking it back to their home countries. In 2004, the US-based pro-Israel Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, a self-described civil rights organization, began sending US police delegations to Israel. What does that have to do with civil rights, I wonder? It hoped to give these officers invaluable insights in the wake of the September 11th, 2001 attacks into how Israel tackled counterterrorism. More than 1,000 police have since visited Israel with the ADL program and other pro-Israel groups. They learn what Israel has to tell them about suicide bombers, intelligence gathering, and terrorism. The Israelification of U.S. security services accelerated immediately after 9/11. U.S. Capitol Police Chief Terrence W. Gaynor said in 2005, Israel is the Harvard of anti-terrorism. So the potency of Palestine as a laboratory for methods of control and separation of populations is my primary focus in this book. How Israel has exported the occupation and why it's such an attractive model are examined in ways that frame the Jewish state as one of the most influential nations on the planet. Okay, I'll tell you right now, I ended up skipping over a lot of this book because the author's like a commie or something and is constantly whining about trying to make connections of how Israel helped oppression of leftists or something. And I'm not totally unsympathetic in all cases to oppression of leftists, but it's not what I want to focus on here. I'm really interested in how this technology is making it, being sold in the rest of the world, being used against Americans, Westerners, and so forth. So I am, like I said, going to skip around quite a bit. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so this is a key point here, is that this is, as mentioned, large weapons dealer. Israel has become a large weapons, it's become a big business for them. It's really become key to their economy, okay? So Thomas Friedman, New York Times bureau chief in Jerusalem between 1984 and 1988, published a major story in 1986 with the headline, How Israel's Economy Got Hooked on Selling Arms Abroad. Israel, with only 4 million people, has become one of the top 10 arms exporters in the world, and Israeli businessmen are among the world's leading arms merchants. Around 10% of the Israeli workforce, 140,000 people, were involved in the arms trade. Let me say that again. Around 10% of the Israeli workforce involved in the arms trade. It makes me think of what was said about Prussia, that it was an army with a sort of like a population attached, Would it be unfair to view Israel as an arms manufacturer with, some other people supporting them? That's quite a lot of the workforce that is devoted to the arms trade. Let's see, it says the role of regional and global policemen is something that many Israelis find attractive. Let's see, David Ivry, Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Defense, said that the Israeli arms and security industry could compete in a global market against bigger nations because state-of-the-art technology was tested in battle by the Israeli army. I've heard that you can get in trouble if you develop something with unethical means. They said something about it at Nuremberg. I don't know. Doesn't seem to apply here for whatever reason. Excuse me just a moment. Okay. Ben Gurion recognized in the early years of the nation that building an arms production industry would be beneficial for the Jewish state. The massive amounts of reparations given to Israel from West Germany in 1952 provided the investment resources the sector needed, and Israel transferred much of it secretly into weapons development and the research to develop a viable nuclear weapon. Huh, that's interesting. So reparations from West Germany for what they had been accused of doing to Jews was used to build up arms and nukes in Israel. Ending the conflict with the Palestinians is bad for business. Israel, let's see, Wall Street Journal in 81, Israel's complained that in criticizing Israelis' hawkish policies, the U.S. overlooks the fact that Israel has served as a kind of combat laboratory for U.S. weapons development. Some Palestinian eggs have to be cracked to make the omelet here of U.S. weapons development. But such is life, I guess. Okay. The centrality of Israeli arms to the country's economic survival is impossible to overestimate. The economy abandoned oranges for hand grenades. So all this money on arms, but then also Israeli cyber companies took in 40% of the world's funding in the sector in 2021. So that's part of the story that interests me in this book, that turn from conventional weapons to cyber, hacking, spying, getting in our devices, that kind of stuff. That's been a real pivot for Israel here. Israel supported the police forces of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Costa Rica during the Cold War, when the U.S. Congress had blocked U.S. agencies from officially doing so. Both Israel and the U.S. trained and armed death squads in Colombia well into the 2000s. Okay, that was just interesting to me for a different reason. Okay. Skipping some of this. Yeah, this is how they help various regimes that could be viewed as unsavory. Okay, yeah. Here's that line I wanted to share with you, this quote I wanted to share with you. In 1982, Israel was involved in its own military misadventures and massacres in neighboring Lebanon, which served as a warning on the limits of Israeli power. They basically were driven out of Lebanon after occupying it for some years. However, these campaigns were an effective marketing tool for its equipment. This was an apparent contradiction. Like, why do you want to buy from Israel if it's like losing, right? But it played out similarly to other nations with large defense industries. Washington hasn't won a major conflict since World War II, and yet its defense sector is the biggest and most profitable in the world. Failure and defeat in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan has not taken a toll on owning 37% of the global share of arms between 2015 and 2020. So, what lesson do we draw from this? What was it called? The Colin Powell doctrine or whatever that Scott Horton was talking about. If the U.S. is going to do something abroad, it should be defined. There should be a clear idea of what is a victory condition and how we're going to do what we do, finish, and get out, right? Well, that would be one kind of motivation for the U.S. getting involved in things and the Israel getting involved in conflicts. But then there's other people who are going to benefit whether there's clearly defined objectives, whether it's considered a win or not, right? So there's some people who are just going to make money just as long as there's conflict going on, right? There's a motivation just to get us into shit, right? So, yeah, war is a racket, Euro says. Okay, September 11th. Not sure how much more I'm going to cover. I'll decide. Let's see. whole culture of security has turned the Israeli establishment into a state within a state. Which what he means is that weapons dealers called the shots in Israel. So they're driving things in Israel to some degree, just as we talk about the military-industrial complex in the U.S. I mentioned this, Israel is protected diplomatically by the U.S. from a tsunami of global condemnation after decades of occupation and frequent wars in Gaza. And of course, we've been particularly seeing this as the whole world has just been absolutely shocked by, what's been called the world's first live-streamed genocide in Gaza over the last almost 2 years. In 1981, U.S. aid was equivalent to roughly 10% of Israel's economy, but by 2020, at close to $4 billion annually, it was down to around 1%. For this reason, Israel cares far less about even the mildest American pressure to curtail illegal Jewish colonies in the West Bank, attacks on Gaza, house demolitions in East Jerusalem. I thought that was an interesting detail, right? At one time, U.S. aid was a real significant, they wanted to be very careful that they didn't lose that. Now, as long as the U.S. keeps giving them that diplomatic backing, they kind of don't care. Evidence indicates that Israel continued sending weapons to the Hutus in the 1994 Rwanda genocide, such as grenades, guns, ammunition, even when the genocide had started on April 1994, and between 800,000 and 1 million Rwandans were massacred in the next 100 days. So sometimes the weapons that Israel provides are used in ways that don't seem very nice. Obviously, we all know this, but go ahead and, draw all these threads together here. The September 11th, 2001 terror attacks on New York and Washington turbocharged Israel's defense sector and internationalized the war on terror that the Jewish state had been fighting for decades. On the night of the attack, pay attention, folks. On the night of the attack, former Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked on American TV what the attacks had meant for relations between the two nations. "It's very good," he immediately said. He quickly corrected himself. "Well, not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy." Maybe he was, you might say, dancing in his heart a little. I don't know. Then 7 years later, in April 2008, Netanyahu was giving a speech in Israel, and he said, "We are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq. These events had swung American public opinion in our favor." Good bully for them, as my grandma would say. Israel arms industry fully embraced the homeland security sector, bringing in billions of dollars in revenue for missiles, drones, and surveillance equipment. The message was unambiguous. "We have been fighting a war on terror since our birth. We'll show you how it's done." And this is interesting from the Council on Foreign Affairs. There was a 2009 book called Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle. Anyway, thought that was just funny. CFR there. CFR, folks. Okay, let's see. So for there was more than a decade of Netanyahu pushing for Israel to become one of the world's leading tech developers with an expertise on weapons, surveillance, and cyber tools. Both the Israeli government and private companies promoted their products as effectively battle-tested on Palestinians. Let's see. The Israel Aerospace Industries, IAI, somebody said they should have just written, instead of writing code that will get thousands of people addicted to poker when working in technology, come work with the IAI and write code that will kill those very same people with guided missiles, drones, and smart munitions. So Israel fully embraced the war on terror, richly profited from it. Israel played a key, though largely unpublicized part in Colombo's, this is in Sri Lanka, Colombo's successful campaign in a civil war that killed and disappeared more than 200,000 people, mostly Tamils, over a quarter century that ended in 2009. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to skip that. Let's see. Right, so the ability to monetize the occupation was turbocharged after 9/11, the 9/11 terror attacks. But the message was sold to willing nations around the world. According to Scottish expert on surveillance studies, David Lyon, it was a wholesale reimagining of what societies would look like in the 21st century. Surveillance had spilled out of its old nation-state containers to become a feature of everyday life. At work, at home, at play, on the move. I'm picturing one of those 50s film strips. Industry, progress. So far from the single all-seeing eye of Big Brother, myriad agencies now trace and track mundane activities for a plethora of purposes. Abstract data, now including video, biometric, and genetic, as well as computerized administrative files, are manipulated to produce profiles and risk categories in a liquid, networked system. The point is to plan, predict, and prevent by classifying and assessing those profiles and risks. This technology was used to secure the 2004 Athens Olympic Games, the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. Israel had positioned itself as one of the best and more reliable providers of crowd management techniques, command and control rooms, and urban security. Let's see. Oh, the Alpha Gun Girls, the AGA, were founded, fun details here, were founded in 2018 by former IDF veteran Oren Julie, a group of scantily dressed women caressing Israeli military hardware and wearing camouflage. They mirrored a similar gun culture in the US, but with a strongly Zionist agenda. So they took something that would be sort of viewed as sort of native and patriotic and just stuck a Zionist agenda on it. That is really interesting. I wonder if they've ever done that other times. Let's see. Social media and a transnational private defense industry have democratized the lusty aesthetics of warfare. The lusty aesthetics of warfare. That's a great phrase. Sexualizing Israeli weaponry was a brazen way to counter growing online criticism of Israeli occupation policies, and a tactic that connects the Jewish state with the huge number of mostly right-wing and pro-Israel American supporters of the National Rifle Association. I mean, it's sort of darkly funny, some of this stuff, I think. Let's see. Yeah, so many checkpoints through which Palestinians are forced to travel to access their schools, workplaces, or Israel, if they are fortunate enough to get one of the few work permits handed out by the Jewish state, use facial recognition technology and biometric details to document their every move. Let's see. When then coming to the Russia's special operation, right? Within days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, the Israeli press was filled with stories about the prospect of huge orders from Europe of Israeli defense equipment. The 2022 Israeli Defense Exposition in Tel Aviv, country's largest arms trade fair, brought 12,000 people in police forces and militaries from 90 nations. And artificial intelligence-led surveillance tools were prominently on show. Yes, whoever brought up AI, you saw that coming. That was 2022. They were already showing this stuff off to governments. Here's an interesting footnote. The former Biden administration press secretary Jen Psaki worked for AnyVision, remember them, as a crisis communications consultant. Interesting. IDF uses, The IDF uses extensive facial recognition with a growing network of cameras and mobile phones to document every Palestinian in the West Bank. In 2022, Israel installed a remote-controlled system for crowd control in Hebron, a tool with the ability to fire tear gas, sponge-tipped bullets, and stun grenades, all from the comfort of your home. Is created by the Israeli company Smart Shooter, which claims to successfully use artificial intelligence when finding targets. Excuse me. Okay, sorry, distracted by the wife briefly, because life keeps going even when I'm on air. Very fun. Okay, let's see. Blue Wolf was a smaller version of their Wolfpack database, which contained the personal details of virtually every Palestinian in the West Bank, including educational status, photos, security level, family history. Let's see. In the past, Israel helped tapping phones, and now Israel hacks mobile phones. So there's a continuity there, I guess. Wonder if in the old days they ever helped tap the phones of, you know, the John Birch Society people or something like that, you know. Okay, so let me see if there's anything else I want to cover before I stop. More dark stuff. Killing or injuring Palestinians should be as easy as ordering pizza. That was the logic behind an Israeli military-designed app in 2020 that allowed a commander in the field to send details about a target on an electronic device to troops who would then quickly neutralize that Palestinian. The colonel working on the project, Oren Matzliach, told the Israel Defense website that the strike would be like ordering a book on Amazon or a pizza in a pizzeria using your smartphone. So what's appealing to growing numbers of regimes globally is learning how Israel gets away with politicide. This is a term that created by Baruch Kimmerling. He says, by politicide, I mean a process that has as its ultimate goal the dissolution of the Palestinian people's existence as a legitimate social, political, and economic entity. This process may also, but not necessarily, include their partial or complete ethnic cleansing from the territory known as the Land of Israel. Right, so hopefully you're getting the theme. You're a regime that wants to do something extremely nasty to people under your political control. And so you look to Israel for some tips and tricks and technologies and training, etc. I wanted to mention this from Martin van Crefeld, an Israeli military historian that I met a couple times and was friendly with. So there's a little trivia for you. In 2002, Israeli military historian Martin van Crefeld explained the dilemma faced by the Jewish state. He says, if you are strong and fighting the weak, then if you kill your opponent, you're a scoundrel. If you let him kill you, you're an idiot. Thought that was interesting. Van Crefeld, the reason I knew about him was he wrote a book called like The Rise and Decline of the State. Very interesting book talking about how the nation state as we know it is less and less able to get things done. And more we see sort of irregular or non-nation state entities having influence and winning wars against nation states, as we saw like in Afghanistan, for example. Okay. Yeah, there was hope at the birth of the digital revolution that being able to film and disseminate photos and videos of Israeli abuses in Palestine might help the Palestinian cause. There is also a large body of evidence that hard visual imagery has been co-opted by the Israeli state to deny the reality of what Palestinians say they are experiencing. Israel's social media warriors know that connecting its mission to Washington's post-9/11 struggles is vital to eliciting sympathy and support. Okay, anyway, I feel like I'm nattering on here and I've got to decide on a yeah, oh, Unit 8200. That was mentioned in the article we started with. Let's just learn a little bit more. The driving force behind many of Israel's most celebrated defense products is Unit 8200. The intelligence unit of the IDF, it is the equivalent of the National Security Agency in the US, the NSA, and is staffed by elite young recruits with an appetite for spying, computer hacking, and surveillance. Its primary goal is mass monitoring of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, detailing all their personal and political information, and listening to communications from allies and foes across the world. NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden said that he was shocked by the extent of intelligence sharing between the US and Israel. Raw private communications that included content and metadata. Such details would usually be minimized, meaning the personally identifiable data was removed. But the NSA was sharing huge amounts of emails and phone calls of Arab and Palestinian Americans whose relatives in Palestine may become targets due to the information gleaned. I think that's amazing, Snowden said. It's one of the biggest abuses we've seen. Don't worry, I'm sure it wasn't our information. It was just those Arab and Palestinian Americans that they handed over to Israel. Not good old regular heritage Americans, right? We have nothing to worry about. Let's see. National intelligence estimate in the U.S. alleged that Israel is the third most aggressive intelligence service against the U.S. As you probably know, Israel has famously been caught spying and stealing nuclear secrets and all kinds of stuff from the U.S. Citizens in countless nations are negatively impacted by products designed by Unit 8200 veterans, who staff countless prominent and secretive Israeli companies, including NSO Group, the world's most successful cyber surveillance firm. Let's see. Oh, this is a book worth knowing about. 2018 book, Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations by Israeli reporter Ronan Bergman. I've been hearing a lot about that book. I don't think I'm going to cover it but in this series, but one worth knowing about. Rise and Kill First by Bergman. Okay, maybe I'll end here. The COVID-19 pandemic was the perfect opportunity for Israeli surveillance firms to attract business. Arresting the spread of the disease required effective contact tracing, and Israeli companies promoted themselves as the best in the world. Israel's response to COVID-19 was unprecedented in the Western world. It used its internal security service, the Shin Bet, to track and monitor potential COVID cases, though it had been secretly collecting all mobile phone metadata since at least 2002, and follow social media posts for any evidence of social gatherings. Fun. Carbine, founded by former members of Israeli military intelligence, it was used during the pandemic to accurately locate COVID patients. It was backed by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, billionaire investor Peter Thiel, and a small investment from now deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Wow, that's quite a set of names there. Decades of occupation thus made Israel ready for the COVID-19 challenge. Okay, I don't think I'm going to cover more. That's mostly what I wanted to get, I think. Excuse me just a sec as I zoom, and then I'll read a super chat and we'll be out of here. I started really skimming at this point. Well, they have a whole chapter, Israeli mass surveillance in the brain of your phone. Let's see. Israeli surveillance apparatus is a competitor and ally of Washington's National Security Agency, the NSA, most powerful eavesdropping network in the world. Another quote from Edward Snowden. The phone in your hand exists in a state of perpetual insecurity, open to infection by anyone willing to put money in the hand of this new insecurity industry. The entirety of this industry's business involves cooking up new kinds of infections that will bypass the very latest digital vaccines, that is, security updates, and then selling them to countries that occupy the red-hot intersection of a Venn diagram between desperately craves the tools of oppression and sorely lacks the sophistication to produce them domestically. An industry like this, whose sole purpose is the production of vulnerability, should be dismantled. So basically, they sell hacking, right, to governments, hacking of our phones. Let's see. Oh, this is an interesting quote from Ronan Bergman and Mark Mazzetti. Same Bergman of that book I was just mentioning. Cyber weapons have changed international relations more profoundly than any advance since the advent of the atomic bomb. Let's see. Then it talks about NSO. They soon realized the potential of developing a tool that could access a mobile phone undetected. And we learned a bit about that in the article. Okay, I'm not sure that I'm going to do more. Okay, yeah, I think you get the general idea. I was not trying to, I hope I got your interest on this topic. I had not thought about any such thing before, that what was happening to the Palestinians was, in addition to just being bad in itself, having implications for the rest of us, with Israeli technology honed against the Palestinians and then used on the rest of us. Caleb writes, if God blesses those who bless Israel, why did God send Nebuchadnezzar to destroy Egypt after she had aided Israel? Until they return to him, they can expect a repetition, as can those who aid them. Yes, good points. All right, and Vingle says, thanks for this, Rad Lib. I appreciate it. Let me see if anything came in on Subscribestar. Nope. Otherwise, I think I am all caught up on chats and tips and such things. And with that, I will find my way to the thing that lets me shut things down. Yeah, I actually don't know what I'm doing next. I don't know that I'm going to continue on the Specialest relationship. If you found this interesting and would like to know more about the relationship between the US and Israel, I think you'll find the series very interesting. There's a link to the whole series in the YouTube video description of this video, or just go to my channel on YouTube, Radical Liberation, and go to the playlist, and you'll find the Specialest, as in special, specialer, Specialest. Because, of course, the U.S. and Israel relationship is quite remarkable, one could say. And I covered the Israel Lobby by Mearsheimer and Walt. What did I do more recently? Oh, talked about how some sort of Zionists from 100 years ago were moving against Russia, targeting Russia in the Russia-Japan war and in some other ways. So, you know, I thought that was interesting because nothing seems to change, right? It's still going on 100 years later. You know, the ethnic grievance against Russia and the U.S. being used in that ethnic grievance. So anyway, let's have peace and not mass murder. That would be nice, but I am afraid there's going to be a bit of standing up, speaking the truth, and being brave before we get to that peace. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your support. Thanks to the supporters on Subscribestar, and hope to see you next week.